As we grapple with a deadly and extremely virulent second wave of COVID-19, questions have now begun to emerge on how exactly we planned for this, or was there a complete failure and total lack of planning on behalf of the government. Adding fuel to this fire are recent statements by Serum Institute of India Chief Adar Poonawalla in interviews to the FT and the Times, alluding to not getting enough orders in time or in advance to be able to manufacture vaccines in the quantity that India needs. He's talked about this having been delayed. On the other hand, we are short of vaccines. We're also short of life-saving drugs right now, whether it's remdesivir or whether it's other kind of drugs. We're also short of oxygen in some parts of the country, and we're seeing the devastating scenes coming out from Delhi. So how did we find ourselves in this position where we're today at the brink of a collapse in the medical infrastructure, extreme shortages of all of these very important elements to fight back COVID-19, and what can we do to recover from this? To speak to us on some of these very pressing issues, I'm joined today by Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, who's the Executive Chairperson of Biocon Limited. Thank you so much, ma'am, for speaking with us here at ET Now. I'm going to take this part by part, and I want to focus first on the issues of vaccinations. I mean, it's no mystery right now that we are completely mismatched when it comes to the number of vaccines we need and the number which is available right now. The 18 to 44 vaccination drive has started, but frankly, it's more of a token with very few people having access to vaccines. In the light of information that has come about from what Mr. Poonawalla has said in interviews to some publications, do you think there is a case to be made that India seemed to be unprepared to actually vaccinate a large number of the population?
Thank you, Tamanna, for these questions. Let me start by saying that, when India grappled with the first wave, we actually went in for a intense lockdown and gave ourselves time for preparedness planning. And if you recall, at that time, we managed the epidemic far better than now, because we spent that time trying to basically deal with, the hospital shortage, the, shortages in medicines, etc. And at that time, we didn't even have a vaccine anywhere in sight. I think once we started seeing this first wave recede, we started believing that we were in a safe place, including myself, I must admit. And then from January this year, when the vaccine became available, we thought that we had actually overcome the pandemic and that we had the luxury of time to basically vaccinate our population, as well as basically not even bother about further preparedness planning, because I don't think anyone anticipated a second wave. Now we are in a situation where we are really ravaged by the pandemic, and we are really overwhelmed, both in terms of our medical infrastructure, whether it is hospital beds, oxygen, ICU beds, or whether it is medicines like remdesivir, itolizumab, tocilizumab, etc. And of course, amidst all this, we are also seeing there's an acute vaccine shortage, because I think that vaccination is the only way we are going to pull through this whole pandemic in a safe, short way. So I personally believe that this second wave is a huge learning for us. It's a rude awakening that our preparedness planning has been neglected. And I really believe that we need to really focus on some of these issues going forward, such as stockpiling of essential medicines and medical supplies, also making sure that we vaccinate at speed and scale, because we need to ensure that every vial produced every day must go into an arm. So I think that's what we need to do. Today, there's too much of time lag between the vaccine being produced and making it available at the vaccination sites. We can't afford that time lag. It has to be almost real time. Only then can we actually vaccinate our way out of this pandemic.
So let me come to the specific issue of why are we so short of vaccines today, and the statements that have been made by Mr. Poonawalla. I'm focusing on this because he manufactures effectively over 80% of the vaccines that are available in India today, and we're extremely dependent on his manufacturing capabilities. Now, when you say that no one saw the second wave coming, do you think responsibility needs to be affixed to a lack of orders placed with the Serum Institute of India? Today, Mr. Poonawalla says that he is getting threatening calls because people want the vaccine, important people want the vaccine. But did we really unnecessarily delay placing the orders? What was the thinking, that you wouldn't need to vaccinate everyone?
No, I don't think that is the reasoning. I think the reasoning is that we had the luxury of time to vaccinate. Okay. If you remember, we started our vaccination program in January, in mid-January. And I think the orders were placed in January. I mean, from a preparedness planning point of view, I would have actually started producing vaccines at risk way back in August, when both Bharat Biotech and Serum Institute were producing vaccines. We should have made them produce vaccines at risk, because that's how most countries went about it. Whether it was the Moderna vaccine, whether it was the Pfizer vaccine, whether it was any vaccine. The BARDA funding actually went into scaling up manufacturing, and in a way they started, producing vaccines at risk. None of that kind of funding went into vaccines at risk production. So I think we should learn from this pandemic. And in terms of preparedness planning going forward, the government must basically invest in safety stocks or stockpiling, whatever you call it. We must invest in also preparedness planning for vaccines. If there are new vaccines coming, we should be investing in those vaccines, producing those vaccines at risk, even before they are approved. So I think these are the kind of measures we have to take going forward. These are lessons and hard lessons learned.
Yeah, and these lessons have caused the people to pay a heavy price, and that's really the concerning part. Let me move from vaccines to even very crucial drugs, one of which, Ms. Shaw, your company also makes. That's Remdesivir. You, of course, make Itolizumab, Tocilizumab. Some of these are now in extreme short supply. What can be done to increase their levels which are available? How soon can this happen?
So, Tamanna, I just want you to know that whether it is a drug like Remdesivir or Itolizumab, or whether it is a vaccine, there is a time lag before you start addressing surge demand. And the reason you need safety stock or stockpiling is to give you that time to ramp up. So, for instance, when we had the first wave and we were selling Remdesivir and Itolizumab, the amount of this drug that was required was not at these levels today. And we all used to make product, and we maintained a small inventory, a reserve inventory for a rainy day. Now we've got a surge demand that is basically asking us to produce 10x of what we have as reserve inventory. It's impossible to cater to that surge demand in such a short time. So all of us are grappling with the efforts to actually ramp up our production to cater to the surge demand. Now, Remdesivir being what we call as a small molecule or a synthesized molecule takes a little shorter than an Itolizumab, which is a biologic, or a vaccine, which is also a biologic. Now, what happens with these products is it takes at least 6 to 8 weeks before you can actually get the product into the market. That is why for Serum Institute or Bharat Biotech to ramp up their vaccine manufacturing is going to take that much time, from vial to the vaccine. And it's the same case with us. From vial to vein, it takes 6 to 8 weeks. We can't shorten that process. So I think that is really the challenge today, and we are going to have to put up with this shortage for some time. So I know that Remdesivir will get sorted out by the 3rd week of May or so. And our product, Itolizumab, will get sorted out by the middle of or late June at the latest. So these are the kind of challenges that industry is facing. And that's why going forward, I request the government and the hospitals to please carry some safety stock in the eventuality of another wave hitting us.
No, so in the interim, what can be done, Ms. Shaw? So there are two parts to this question. One is the shocking fact that some of these drugs are now being sold in the black market at very high prices, sometimes spurious as well. So A, how do you ensure that even those who are getting these very limited stocks, at least getting the real thing and at the right price? And secondly, do you think there is a case for allowing compulsory licensing? This is a question which has come up before court as well, to make sure that more manufacturers can make this and maybe speed up the process?
I really don't think this calls for a compulsory license at this point in time, because let's face it, Remdesivir is made by voluntary licenses being issued to 7 companies. And all these 7 companies are ramping up. And as I said earlier on, the capacity constraints will be met in a few weeks' time. So giving compulsory licenses to other companies is of no use, because it takes at least a few months before any new producer can at least qualify their production and get it to the market. So I don't think any more compulsory licenses are required, because it's more to do with capacity and ramping up.
And what about the fact that the medications are so hard to find that unscrupulous middlemen have come into the picture who are selling sometimes spurious medication at multiple times the rate?
Yeah, that is absolutely unacceptable, and it has to be prevented at any cost. And I think the way it is being done is for people basically to procure these kind of products from authorized sources. I know that, for instance, anyone wanting our drugs is not advised to pick it up from anybody in the market, only from authorized sources who we direct them to, or the government, also is supplying these drugs. And I know I have myself been catering to individual requests. I mean, I keep getting lots of requests from various people almost every other minute of the day. And I think we are basically making sure that we are dealing with these requests in a very closed loop manner. And I myself have put out a lot of messaging saying, please do not procure these drugs from unauthorized sources, because they are likely to be either spurious or they are going to be black marketed, and we do not approve of that. So I request everyone using your show today to please do not pick up these drugs from unauthorized sources. They are likely to be spurious.
Let me come to the question of oxygen now, Ms. Shaw, and we are seeing this play out very, vocally in Delhi, but there are other cities, other places outside the cities as well where oxygen shortages are now being reported. It has been at least 10 days, courts have been seized of this, a lot of, messages have been put out there. But why, in your view, are we not able to find a solution? Is this a time to think out of the box? What are the different ways we can ensure that at the very least, people don't die in hospital beds gasping for breath?
So to begin, obviously this reflects on the need for preparedness planning. And the fact that we've gotten to this stage shows we need to have much better preparedness planning for these medical essentials. Now, I think what we need to look at right now, I understand that there are some states that are doing better than others, some states that have got, oxygen adequacy, oxygen surplus, and others that have a huge deficit of oxygen. Can we not basically create a map of oxygen availability and make sure that the logistics at least start addressing some of these very acute deficits in certain states? In the meantime, of course, I know that there's a huge, massive effort to get into the country several oxygen generators, several oxygen, of course, concentrators, oxygen BPAP machines, ventilators, and what have you. And I think we really need to take a stock of what is required right now. I don't think, we have really got really granularity in terms of what is required where. I know that Delhi is in a desperate place. I know that many parts of the countries have the same problem. And yet other parts of the country are doing quite okay. I know Kerala is supposed to be an oxygen surplus state. So should we not look at these kind of aspects of the pandemic and oxygen requirement and make sure that this never happens again? So again, it's about preparedness planning. It's about making sure that you really understand what has happened this time and have a corrective and action plan that doesn't ever get you into this situation again.
So do you think that we are, now that we're in the middle of this second wave, and I would say from the beginning of the month, it has been pretty apparent, the beginning of last month, it's been pretty apparent that we're heading towards a big second wave. So we've had about 25 to 30 odd days to deal with this right now. Do you think there is a clear action plan in your view? Or are we still very scattered with state governments, having to be at the forefront of these plans and sometimes bickering with each other about supplies?
So if one thing the center should be doing, which they always, wanting to control the pandemic and issue various kind of diktats, I personally believe it will be a combination of lockdowns and vaccinations that will save the day. I don't think we can avoid lockdowns because it is just too dangerous to do that. I think we have to have very intense lockdowns like we had the last time. And we need to make sure we supplement it with vaccinations. We should have certain very important strategies of how we are going to vaccinate. For instance, one of the things we've been discussing at the state level is to say that if any high-rise building has a test positivity rate of greater than 10%, they should vaccinate those high-rise buildings immediately to prevent further transmission or spread. Equally, in highly dense populated parts of any city, like slums or any other densely populated parts of the city, again, when you find a test positivity rate less than 10%, just vaccinate those people because they should not be infected. Things like that. I think those kind of strategies are very important to implement. And I think this has to call for, rapid testing and making sure that you do it in a very scientific way. There are various ways of deploying testing strategies. And I think that's what you need to do. I said, without vaccinating the people who are vulnerable and who are likely to spread the disease, I think you're not going to be in a safe place. In fact, I, way back in January, had suggested that we should not have this age-tiered vaccination at such a slow pace. I said, we are in a safe spot. Let's vaccinate as many people as possible. And let's vaccinate both the young and old. Because I said, even if you vaccinate the elderly with one shot, they are not protected because they come back to homes with younger people who are actually spreading the virus. So I was not listened to, but I really still maintain, now that they've opened it to 18 years and above, it's a very good step. But I think let's vaccinate people fast. I think we need to vaccinate workforces, people who are exposing themselves to the virus, construction workers, manufacturing labor, manufacturing workers. I, for one, have always maintained that the pharmaceutical industry should have been labeled as an essential industry right from the start of the pandemic, and the employees of pharmaceutical industries should have been labeled as essential workers, because if they contract
just one
disrupt our manufacturing, you're going to not have medicines to be manufactured.
Just one word from you, ma'am. You talked about how a combination of lockdowns and vaccines are essential right now. I want to get a little more detailed reply from you on the question of lockdown, because now you have organizations like the CII also talking about the need for a lockdown. And this is quite surprising, because business and industry was at the forefront the first time round, saying that a very strict lockdown has long-term harm and effects in a country like ours with a large inflation informal sector. Today, looking at the situation, would you say a lockdown, nationwide lockdown, is necessary?
It is, because you have to look at what's happening. The pandemic is ravaging our economy as well. Let's not forget. Okay. So I think you have to be sensible. As long as you have a strategy for lockdowns. That's why I said, if you have these kind of strategies where if you have a test positivity rate less than 10% and you vaccinate those people, you can start opening up those areas. If you vaccinate workforces, if you start that's why I had said right from January we should be if you want to open up the economy, you must vaccinate the workforce, you must vaccinate the students, you must vaccinate these kind of parts of society. But obviously it wasn't a strategy that was thought of in the way I was thinking about it.
Yeah. Well, let's hope for the best. Thank you so much, Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, for taking out the time to speak with us and give us your views on how things can get better. I think very important point coming in that the supply of Remdesivir will improve by the 3rd week of May. Other important drugs will now be available hopefully by the end of June, and we can hope that those supplies get ramped up quickly as well. Thank you once again.